Another really impressive win last night for Duke men's basketball. Bellarmine, the opponent, and Duke walks away with a 74-57 win against the Knights. We're going to break it all down on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. It's so great to have you here with us on this Wednesday. We're talking about Duke men's hoops, or Tuesday, I should say, as Duke was able to defeat Bellarmine last night by a score of 74-57. The Blue Devils are now 4-1 on the year. We're going to discuss all of that here on today's show. Locked On Blue Devils is a daily podcast devoted to everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. You can follow us on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils and follow me on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_. Be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast for free wherever you get your podcasts. We're out every day of the week, weekdays. We've got a brand new show for you. Go and subscribe, and also make sure you watch the show daily on YouTube as well. Really trying to grow that YouTube audience on our march towards 1,000 subscribers. Your support of Locked On Blue Devils on the YouTube platform means the absolute world. Joining me on today's show, I'm very thrilled to bring back in a good buddy of mine, Ryan Lommen at the Duke Nation on Twitter, to recap last night's win. Ryan, the time is greatly appreciated. It's been a little bit since we last spoke, and now all of a sudden we're 5 games into the basketball season. Hope you're doing well, man.
Hey, man. Yeah, I appreciate you having me. It was funny the last time we chatted, we were talking about so many unknowns and everything, and I still feel like there's still a lot of unknowns with this team in the lineup, but it's good to have a little bit more clarity and just fun to have Duke basketball back to watch. And now we get to watch them on Thanksgiving again, which is awesome.
Look, and it's great to have more wins than losses at any point. And I think oftentimes as a Duke basketball fan, you can take your schedule for granted, but we have seen tons of programs, like big name programs, have really tough nights shooting the basketball or doing a variety of different things. And yes, there's the Kansas game, but that's a really big program that Duke was able to take on in the Champions Classic. Shout out to Duke for being able to take care of business against those other 4 opponents that they were able to put away.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at teams like Gonzaga and Kentucky who have both, Gonzaga ended up beating Kentucky pretty bad, but before that, against Texas, it just looks like teams are struggling to find their way right now. And I think Duke's game against Kansas, in my opinion, wasn't that big of a letdown. Sure, they kind of choked it away and they couldn't finish, but I think there's a lot of coachable things that came from that game, and you saw it a lot in the Bellarmine game with the ball movement was a lot more. The last 4 minutes of that Kansas game, we didn't move the ball. The ball seemed they seemed to play a little bit more ISO than they should have been. Jeremy Roach kind of try to do a little bit of takeover, it seemed like, and they weren't doing what was working the whole time, and that was moving the ball, getting the ball in a Flip's hands and making plays. So seeing them come back last night and doing what they did with a lot of really good ball movement that opened up a lot of guys for in the first half, shooting I think over 50% from 3. Obviously that number comes down a little bit, and which is expected to, but just good to see them learning and taking strides in the right direction and making adjustments after some failures in a game. So yeah, and seeing Kentucky struggle kind of quite a bit in the last 2 games against some good opponents, and Gonzaga makes you feel a little bit better. Even UNC struggled a little bit against some mediocre opponents in the first half and even late in the second half. So it takes time. We're in November. We got a long season ahead of us. So
no doubt. And I mean, this Bellarmine team defeated Louisville, and Louisville's having a really, really tough year, and they're not going to end up where they want to this season. But still, Louisville's a damn good basketball program. And that's what you just can't take these things for granted. So heck of a job by John Shire getting off to a good start this season here in 2022. So for Duke basketball in particular, if you were to give me one bright spot, what's impressed you most? You can only pick one thing. What would it be so far to start the year, Ryan?
I would love to come at you and give you some cool hot take, but it's Kyle Filipowski at this point. I mean, he's got double figures in every game. I think 2 or 3 double doubles. Just for a guy who came in and scouts at practices were saying he was underwhelming and kind of everybody was maybe even knocking him out of the starting lineup, to him doing what he's doing and being back-to-back ACC Rookie of the Week, it's just been super impressive. I didn't watch a ton of him in high school, but from what I saw, I wasn't convinced his game would translate. So I thought he'd be a little bit slower and not as big. And he came in big and ready to prove himself. And so, yeah, I'd say Flip has been my biggest bright spot so far.
Yeah, no, he's been awesome to watch. 3 double-doubles already this year, had another 18.8 rebound performance. He's the first freshman ever to start a career with 3 consecutive double-doubles. And in the past 2 games, he's finished with the identical stat line of 18 points and 8 rebounds. It's been really fun to see him be so versatile offensively. I think we expected that with the outside shooting, but Duke's actually making it a concerted effort to give him a couple of post touches as well, and he's done an effective job down there too.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I was just trying to pull up a tweet. I think it was when him and Lively are on the floor together, Duke is like plus 42 or something like that, which coming into the season was a question for me, is how well those two can gel on the floor, and it seemed to work well. Obviously, Lively isn't a huge offensive threat so far this season. He's more of a defender, rim protector, and floor runner. But just being able to see those two make it work on the floor together is awesome. It just Flip's versatility, man. I mean, he's going up. He's 7 foot with a big wingspan and can bring the ball up the court if we needed him to. It's just been fun to see, and hopefully Lively can take the steps needed from an offensive standpoint to continue improving and proving why he was the #1 recruit in the nation.
Look, I asked you a very open-ended question, and you went with Kyle Filipowski, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. When you think, what's been the most impressive thing so far? What's been the bright spot that you want to highlight? For me, what was coming to mind instantly was the defensive effort that we've seen from Duke, and that's something that oftentimes, Ryan, it's not that fun to talk about. It's pretty boring because, look, everybody wants to see the ball go into the basket, but when you're preventing the team from doing that, you're off to amazing things. Duke is a top 10 team nationally in scoring defense. They're just not giving up a whole lot of points. I still go back to their game they had against South Carolina Upstate, only giving up 38 points in a 40-minute basketball game. I don't care who the opponent is in Division I hoops. When you make it that much of an effort to lock your opponent down, giving up 57 points last night, and this is where we remind you of all of the newcomers that this Duke squad has. When defense relies so much on communication and being in the right place at the right time. I mean, my, oh my, I've been so thrilled with what we've seen defensively.
Yeah, and it's definitely not something that I would have. Yeah, you make a good point. That probably was a better one than Flip, but it's kind of something I never even thought about coming into this season, was like how much better the defense could be this year. Like you said, it's not like we're you don't look at our team and think like defensive minded players like Mark Mitchell, defensive players, sure. Whitehead, sure, but he's been out for the most part. Ryan Young, I mean, not really a rim protector. And then you got Lively, who hadn't played for the first couple of games, and he comes back and he's done really well. So it's not like the players or the names jump out at you as like high level defenders. But I think a lot of it starts with the backcourt, and Roach and Proctor have played really good defense. There's been times where Roach has fallen asleep, or gotten taken advantage of for his size, but Proctor's done really well, and Roach for the most part has held his own. So, and then you bring guys in like Jalen Blakes, who's got a huge wingspan, and defensively that goes a long way. I probably could have used him as the bright spot too, because he's been far and beyond what I would have expected from him this year, which is outstanding. And his defensive effort is there, and his leadership, you can just see he's just oozing with competitiveness and wants to win. And so I think with that backcourt there, it's gone a long way on the defensive end, and obviously it's showing.
That's the best thing about an open-ended question, is that we've got many different directions we could go, because I do want to give some love to our guy, Jalen Blakes. I don't think many people saw his play coming to this level this early in the season. So we'll take our first time out on the program, highlight a little bit more about the win over Bellarmine last night, when Locked On Blue Devils returns here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Upside. Inflation is just a big topic in our country these days, and inflation has us all thinking about various ways to cut back. Whether it's driving less, dining out less, or buying less from the grocery store, we can all agree there is nothing fun about less. That's why I started using Upside. Upside is an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. It's pretty much everybody. Upside, I don't have to cut back because I get cash back on every purchase. To get started, download the free Upside app, use my promo code LOCKED, LOCKED, and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Upside users are earning more than $1 million every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED, LOCKED. Upside is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Welcome back into the program here today. JJ Jackson alongside my buddy Ryan Lommen at the Duke Nation on Twitter. He runs quite an impressive Twitter empire, so make sure you go follow that page for all of your exclusive coverage of Duke men's basketball. A win last night for the Blue Devils against Bellarmine, 74-57, the final score of that one. And Ryan, a good game from Jacob Grandison with a 16 points, second most points for the Blue Devils this season. Tell me a little bit about Grandison's play so far this year.
Yeah, he's been kind of up and down might be the wrong word because he didn't play. He kind of got benched against Kansas, which was interesting. Didn't play at all in the second half because he struggled from three and on the defensive side. But last night it was great to see him kind of come out of his shell a little bit. He's shooting 35% from three from the season. Last night, yeah, what did he go for last night? 6 of 9. That's just, I feel like around that 7 to 9 spot is a perfect amount of shots for him. If they're falling, that means you're going to get a lot of output from him, which obviously we saw last night. It's interesting because he's a type that I feel like as long as his role is just a little bit more than kind of like that spot up shooter, sit in the corner type, because he can slash and cut to the basket with some ease. But he's kind of the type that you're kind of hoping for every game or two can come out and do what he did last night. Defensively, I haven't really watched him as closely as I probably should have. But offensively, it looks like he has the skills to be a perfect 6th or 7th man for this team, especially if he continues shooting it the way he has this year. But yeah, he loves that corner spot, and his ability as a veteran at least to get open and move around without the ball is what has impressed me the most so far.
We're seeing the depth of this Duke men's basketball team, and the ACC network, their broadcast last night highlighted Grandison's play in particular, talking about the fact that in that Kansas game, he's only out there for 10 minutes. But you see in last night's game, 26 minutes for Grandison, the third most minutes on the team, only trailing Roach and Proctor in that regard. And I think that's going to be the kind of trend of Duke men's basketball this season, Ryan, is that they are so deep. Early in his coaching career, again, 5 games into the career, John Shire does appear to be someone that will play more of his guys on the bench than Mike Krzyzewski would throughout his coaching career. And so the depth has been really impressive to see so far this year.
Yeah, I still, part of me wants to take it with a grain of salt because I do think there was times last year,
which is fair,
where not last year, but in years past where K has gone 8 to 9 to sometimes even 10 deep in November. But I will say doing it consistently, like this didn't change with Kansas outside of Grandison getting the 10 minutes. For the most part, it was the same. We played 9 guys there as well, I believe. I don't think Shoot got in there, but
it was even one less too because Dariq Whitehead wasn't available.
Yeah, great point. So he's playing most of the guys that he thinks he has available to him. I said it last night on Twitter that I do find it interesting the amount of different lineups we've seen on the floor at one time, and people have complained a little bit about inconsistency. And I mean, I think that's just a coach trying to figure out what the rotation is going to be. There hasn't been a set rotation yet. Come ACC play, there is most likely going to be a set rotation or 3 or so different lineups he's going to go with. He's going to have a small ball lineup from an offensive standpoint. He'll have the defensive lineup, which he played last night a little bit with, I believe it was Mark, Lively, Blake's, Proctor, and Whitehead. And so that's more of a defensive lineup. So I think right now it's just playing with the lineup. You get to ACC play and there's going to be a set rotation, and whether that has 9 guys or not. At this point, I'd probably say it will be just based on the performance of guys like Blake's and Grandison, who coming in, and Young as well, who coming into the season, you probably didn't slate as 3 guys that would see much meaningful minutes. So just letting Shire tinker with the lineup, see what he likes with these matchups, and then getting into ACC play and having a set rotation or two. I'm looking forward to that.
Really big night shooting the basketball last night for Duke. 14 makes from three-point range on 35 attempts. Only 11 free throws attempted by Duke. That's because so many of their shots are coming from the outside. But when you look at the game in particular, Duke did a really nice job of driving into the lane, and then all of a sudden you find wide open shooters. I didn't feel like there were a lot of really bad shots taken by Duke last night. That number is kind of eye-popping to see 35 shot attempts of your 55 being from three-point range. But did you kind of have the same sentiment that I'm really not overwhelmed by the number of three-pointers given that they were such open looks?
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's so weird to see stats where you're shooting 20 more three-pointers, or you're shooting, it's 55, 30, that's 20 more three-pointers than you are of two-pointers. And it's just weird that it didn't felt like they were forced. The second half, they struggled a lot more than they did in the first half. And so I wasn't mad about the shot selection because they're mostly open. Maybe not so much coming from Mitchell and Blake's would be a little bit better, but hey, they're open. Mitchell made a few in the first half, kind of got him probably feeling himself a little bit. And then Blake's has knocked down a few this season as well. So no, I think when the opportunities are there, you take them. And last night we did. Unfortunately, for the most part of the first half and for a little bit of the second half, they were falling. So I had no issues with the shot selection. I would like to see Derek Lively get a little bit more involved, not giving him post-up plays because that's not really the way he is, but running, he's been pretty open off pick and rolls, and I like to see them kind of doesn't have to be lobs every time, but get him running to the basket and give him the ball with momentum going downhill. He can be dangerous, man. Not many guys at 7'1" can do things he can do, especially against smaller teams. So I'd love to see a little bit more of that, at least in the coming with the PK85 coming up, get him more involved.
Duke wins 74-57 against Bellarmine. Duke is now 4-1 on the year as they downed the Knights last night inside Cameron Indoor Stadium. Duke led by 8 at halftime. In the second half, the game stayed between a 12 and 18-point lead for Duke. So never really out of question that Duke would be able to win the basketball game, but still credit to Bellarmine. They made shots when they needed to. And then on the offensive end of the floor, as we said in the second half, some of those shots just weren't falling as much for Duke compared to what was taking place there in the first half of competition. Last thing I want to touch on with this, rebounding, Ryan, has also been really impressive from Duke so far this season. Last night you saw 8 rebound efforts from Tyrese Proctor and Kyle Filipowski. Ryan Young grabbed 7 boards. And Duke as a team is in the top 6 nationally in rebounding margin, total rebounds, and offensive rebounding. Only them and the Alabama Crimson Tide ranked top 6 in both of those categories. I mean, really impressive what Duke's been able to do rebounding the basketball.
Yeah, I love those stats you just dropped. I didn't realize we were that high in both, so that's awesome. Yeah, I think the one that surprised me the most is Proctor, right? I mean, I know he's a big-bodied guard at 6'5", but averaging almost 6 rebounds a game. We're getting 10 from Filipowski, a guy who I would have expected to maybe get around 5, maybe 6, just with guys like Young and Lively out there to gather those up as well. But Proctor getting 6 is kind of the bright spot to me. He's just a guy who is just a ball hawk. He's always, whether it's on defense or crashing the boards, he's always there. It just seems like the ball is a magnet to him. And so seeing that from a guard is really good. And stuff like that, man, that really comes in handy in March when sometimes when 50-50 balls aren't going your way and you got a 6'5" guard who's crashing the boards like that. That definitely goes a long way. So that's a huge thing. And I'm interested to see how that number keeps up after this weekend and after Iowa next week. If we can keep staying in that top 10 to 15 in rebounding in the country, and especially on the defensive side, that's a good sign for things to come once ACC play gets here.
Third in the country in offensive rebounds at 19.3 offensive boards per game, which is an insane number so far. Duke had 11 more offensive rebounds last night against Bellarmine. All right, let's take our final time out here on the program today. We'll wrap up our conversation with Ryan Lommen when we return in just a moment here on Locked On Blue Devils. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline, your #1 source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. from football to basketball to soccer and esports, we've got it all at BetOnline. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Moving forward here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils, our final few moments alongside my buddy Ryan Lommen at the Duke Nation on Twitter. You guys do a lot of really exciting things covering Duke basketball. Ryan, tell me a little bit about everything you've got going on throughout the year.
Yeah, man. We started up our live show, post-game show with Zion and Russ, who runs Duke Better. And so after hopefully a PK 85 championship game on Sunday, we'll be running it back again. But yeah, mainly a weekly show during the season that just recaps the game, talks about the upcoming games. Normally do it after normally it's 2 games per week. So we do with a bigger game of the week there. And so, yeah, that's a fun show. And then I'm normally always live tweeting during games, giving my opinions, which sometimes people will say are hot takes or a little bit outlandish, but I kind of like playing that role. It's fun, gets people going, gets the conversation going. So it is what it is. But yeah, man, it's a fun time and we're just getting started. So a lot more to come.
All right, so we've got the PK 85 coming up this week, as we said, starting on Thursday with Oregon State, and then Duke on Friday. We'll play the winner of Florida and Xavier, and then Sunday, if things go according to plan, if wins go according to plan for Duke, and if Gonzaga wins both of their games, the next Sunday we'll see a Duke versus Gonzaga matchup. In your mind, what are you hoping to see out of Duke in the PK 85? What's the one big thing that we just haven't seen enough of yet this season?
Yeah, I think it's consistency on the offensive side, not letting the ISO ball sneak back in kind of like it did against Kansas. Teams like Florida and Xavier aren't the greatest teams. I guess I don't follow them closely, but I know Florida lost to Florida Atlantic, I believe, and Xavier just lost a close one to a good Indiana team. So just taking care of business against teams that you should. I get it. It's November. Things can happen. But that game, not that those teams scare me. There's those kind of games with possibly Gonzaga looming after that. You get a look ahead syndrome. And so just making sure that the guys are focused on the task at hand, especially against teams that are going to be playing a little bit of a chip on their shoulder going up against a young Duke team with John Shire at the helm. So, but yeah, offensive consistency. I'm interested to see it with a 3-game tournament, if we can keep up that defensive intensity, especially against a team like Gonzaga, if we get there, and rebounding as well. Because obviously Drew Timme, Julian Strawther, those are some really good and big guys who crash the boards as well as anybody. So I would love to get this team against Gonzaga. I'm not saying I'd be the most confident, but obviously Gonzaga is shown to be beatable. Texas gave us a blueprint on that. And so I trust our coaching staff, but that would be a really, really good test, even better than I think Kansas was in the Champions Classic. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, so we take a look at this game, and again on Thursday, on Thanksgiving Day, 3 p.m. Eastern, you'll be able to watch Duke take on Oregon State, which is no team to look past whatsoever for the Blue Devils to open up the PK 85. But also the last thing I kind of want to highlight here, Ryan, getting set for a weekend in which Duke could play 3 games over a 4-game stretch. Many people want to see what the play of Dariq Whitehead and Derek Lively II looked like, because through the first part of the year, again, you can count on one hand at this point the number of games those guys have played wearing the Duke basketball jersey. They're still trying to work back into game shape themselves, and they really haven't had moments, or I should say stat lines or anything like that would really surprise you or amaze you, anything like that. So I'm curious to see kind of as these guys continue to get back into game shape, how their play develops.
Yeah, I completely forgot about Dariq during the break. I was thinking I need to bring him up. I am curious to see the amount of burn he gets and how well he looks, because obviously 2 games in your college career, I'm not one to bring up a bunch of stuff, and you're coming off an injury, but he just kind of has looked lost, and his explosiveness wasn't there last night. He had that dunk on I believe was a breakaway, and not saying he needs to jump and touch the top of the backboard, but it didn't look like the Dariq I'd seen in high school. I don't want to say he struggled to get above the rim, but it wasn't just one of those flush dunks that you would normally expect out of a 6'7", 6'8", or 6'6", 6'7" guy like Dariq and the athleticism he has. So trying to see what they use him like this weekend, especially against a little bit higher caliber opponents, and seeing just how much more comfortable he can get, because it hasn't looked very comfortable. And that's no slight to Derek. He's going to be a phenomenal player this year. It's just how much ramp up time is he going to need after coming off that somewhat serious injury with the broken foot, and see where that plays out this weekend.
A lot of big things ahead for Duke men's basketball, and hopefully we could see both Lively and Whitehead get back into great playing shape and put together great performances for the Blue Devils as well. Ryan, as always, it's an absolute pleasure to catch up with you and talk all things Duke basketball. Thanks again for stopping by the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. Already looking forward to the next time.
All right, that's my good pal Ryan Lommen. Give him a follow on Twitter at the Duke Nation to watch and follow his coverage of Duke men's basketball. That's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Our good pal Jason Jordan, the director of college basketball recruiting for Sports Illustrated, will be back by for another recruiting look back. You can look forward to watching and listening to that here on Locked On Blue Devils. Subscribe to us on your podcast feed. Also subscribe on YouTube as well. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.